Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Hokage Naruto got harem with Tsunade and Temari, part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. After the pain, Naruto bounced from tree to tree, his strong legs worked tirelessly. The leaf nin wasn't in any real hurry. He was on more of an errand than a mission. Tsunade had gotten tired of him asking when she was going to retire and appoint him as Hokage. To the young man it seemed pointless to wait. He was 25 and one of the top Jonin of Konoha. He had served 6 years as an Anbu and the last year and a half as Tsunade's right hand. He knew everything there was to know about being the Hokage. But still Tsunade insisted the time wasn't right for him to take her place. Uzumaki knew of course what she was waiting for. The Hokage felt he needed to settle down and raise a family. But Naruto knew what the old lady refused to accept. There wasn't a woman in Konoha that would accept him as a suitor, not since the truth about the nine-tailed demon fox inside of him became public knowledge. Before the announcement Naruto had dated Hyuga Hinata for a time, but the two of them quickly realized that they were more friends than anything else. And they still were, even though Hinata was now married to her old teammate Shino. Most of his old classmates accepted him regardless of the demon inside of him. But being friends and lovers were two very different things. I wonder when Granny Tsunade is going to figure that out, the blonde mused. Sure, Naruto had his share of female fans. Not unlike the ones his best friend Sasuke used to have. But they were more interested in have with him for the bragging rights than to have an actual relationship. In the beginning the young man had enjoyed the attention but he quickly realized that none of the girls he dated were interested in more than just a quick fling. So now he ignored them completely. Realizing he was dwelling on a pointless topic, Naruto changed his train of thought to something a little less personal. Like why the hell Tsunade had sent him to retrieve some crop reports from the far side of the land of fire when there really was no hurry for them. Flashback. There really is no hurry Naruto-kun, take your time. I just prefer you be the one to retrieve those reports for me. Tsunade explained to her frustrated apprentice. The truth was the Hokage didn't need the reports at all, but she needed to get the boy out from underfoot for a while. She hoped that with a little time to think about it she could come up with a way to talk her blonde-haired protege into finding a nice girl to settle down with. The dear boy was far too work-orientated in her opinion. And up till now he had shown no interest in having a family of his own. She sighed heavily and Naruto raised an eyebrow at her. Don't the reports usually come with the farmers that bring us grain every year? He asked, completely oblivious to the thoughts running through the Hokage's mind. The boy learns to fast. Tsunade mused, but luckily she had been expecting the question. There is a possibility that we will not be receiving any product from the towns in that area this season. So I want to make sure we get the report regardless. She smiled as Naruto shook his head and opened his mouth to protest. Raising a hand she cut him off. Just think of it as a working vacation. Take your time and enjoy a little R&R. Believe me, you need to have a break, you're not Hokage yet you know. Fine. Naruto conceded. He knew better than to argue with his superior over such a thing. It only succeeded in getting her irritated and the last time he had pressed his luck she had sent him on a recon mission for a month and a half. Tsunade beamed at him. Good, good. Now remember to take some time to enjoy yourself. She told him as she took the papers out of his hands and shooed him out of her office. Now to come up with a plan other than ordering him to marry someone I choose for him. She told herself. Maybe I'll get lucky and he'll fall in love with a girl while he's out and about. She commented hopefully to the empty office. She shook her head. I haven't been that lucky in years. She muttered as she returned to her pile of paperwork. Naruto's love life would just have to wait. End flashback. Naruto came to a sudden halt. He smelled blood, and a fair bit of it too. By his calculations, he was about a day and a half away from his destination. He shrugged. He had no timeline for his arrival, so he could afford to take a detour. Sniffing the air with his sensitive nose, he soon pinpointed the direction the odor was coming from. Without hesitation, he followed the trail. After about 100 yards, he paused again, balancing on a tree branch. The scent was stronger now, and it was distinctly human. Pulling several shuriken from his weapon's pouch, he proceeded at a slower rate. His brow furrowed. Something about this scent is familiar. But try as he might, he couldn't place it. 5 minuets later, he found the source of the blood. If the smell hadn't led him to the body, he probably would have missed it. Hidden under a pile of leaves, all that protruded was part of a delicate white hand. After checking for traps, the blonde leaf nin jumped down from the trees and landed in a crouch beside the pile. "You want to come out of there?" he called gently. The smell of earth and rotting vegetation made difficult for him to decipher the body's scent, or even if the person was alive or not. No answer came, so he stepped closer. He was about to nudge the hand with his foot when a multitude of scents stung his nose. He nearly sneezed from the sensory overload. Female, fear, blood, damp earth, and kneeling down, he quickly started digging through the leaves, but he already had an idea of what he'd find. The first thing he uncovered was a bare shoulder and a tangle of blonde hair. There was no movement from the woman as he continued to pull away the debris covering her body. Brushing the leaves off her back, he discovered that her back and what was left of her clothing had been cut to ribbons. It looked like she had been flogged. He didn't need to uncover the rest of her body to know what had happened to her. His nose told him the story. Beaten and raped, she had been left for dead, only she was still alive. Barely. As carefully as he could, Naruto placed one hand on her shoulder while the other supported her head, and he slowly pulled her over onto her left side. Repositioning himself so his left arm would support her shoulders, he pulled her the rest of the way into his arms. Her head flopped like a rag doll's, facing away from him. The right side that he could see was beaten and bloodied beyond recognition. Trying to assess the full extent of her injuries, Naruto's eyes quickly scanned the rest of her body. The front of her clothing had been ripped away, but because of all the dirt and blood, he was unable to tell what other injuries she had. "You're one hell of a fighter to still be alive after all this, woman," he muttered as he moved his attention back to her face. Grasping her chin as gently as he could, he turned her face towards him to assess the damage on the other side. Only a few bruises and a cut along the cheekbone marred that half, thus allowing the young man to recognize her. "Good God," he gasped in horror. "Temari. Where is she?" Gaara growled as he glared out the window of his office. "Temari's not due back until this afternoon," Kankuro reminded him. The puppet master knew something was wrong with his brother. Gaara had been getting up to look out his office window every 20 minuets all morning. For the red-haired Kazkage, that was considered pacing. "Go find her." Gaara's voice was quiet, and for a moment Kankuro wasn't sure he had heard him right. "Why would I want to do that?" he asked. Their sister was never late, so why couldn't Gaara wait 3 hours? "Take 2 teams," Gaara instructed. "Spread out and find her." Puzzled, Kankuro did as he was told and left the office. He knew better than to argue with his younger sibling. What could be so important, he wondered, that they needed Temari back home sooner than scheduled? Gaara of the desert waited for the door to close behind Kankuro before allowing the worry to show in his aquamarine eyes. Something was wrong, he could feel it in his gut. His older sister was in danger. The Sand Nin wasn't even sure how he knew, but the day before he had gotten a strange feeling of foreboding, and for someone who rarely felt any sort of emotion, he had taken the warning seriously. "Perhaps I am overreacting. I don't believe in trusting one's emotions when making decisions." Even telling himself that didn't help, he was still worried. His sister was the most important person in his life. He didn't know what he would do if anything happened to her. Naruto was glad that Tsunade and Sakura had forced him to learn some healing jutsus. Temari would never survive being moved. Her chakra, or what was left of it, was draining. She would be dead in a matter of an hour, tops. Careful not to overdo it, he gently rested his right palm on her chest and focused his chakra, directing it into her body. After getting her a little more stable, he went to work on her injuries, her face first, then slowly worked down her body. Thanks to the Kyubi no Yoko inside of him, the blonde had an unlimited amount of chakra to draw from. Hence the reason for Tsunade insisting on his medical training. Fractured cheek, broken jaw, multiple cuts and bruises, cracked ribs, internal bleeding. God, Temari, you should be dead. Naruto muttered as he took silent inventory of her injuries. As he worked, he removed the last remnants of her clothing, none of it was usable anymore. Turning her over, started to heal the gashes in her back. Easing her down, Sashi was once again laying face first on the leaves. He used both hands in order to work quicker. The slices were long and deep, in some the bone was showing through. Finally, the ugly wounds were merely red stripes. They would still need time to completely heal, but there wouldn't be any scarring. Satisfied that all the major injuries had been addressed, he continued down her back, buttocks and legs. Nice. As soon as the thought popped into his head, he wanted to knock himself out. Damn it, Naruto, you're supposed to be checking her injuries, not checking her out. He berated himself. Work's done, time for a little reward. Not in your life. He had a sneaking suspicion where those thoughts were coming from, but it couldn't be. He hadn't talked to the demon trapped inside of him in years. Focusing only on his hands, he came across a pulled tendon in her left knee. The left ankle was sprained and her big toe was broken. You put up one hell of a fight, Temari. A smile touched his lips as he worked back up her body, focusing deeper to make sure he hadn't missed anything. That's when he discovered the extent of internal bruising and trauma done to her by her attackers. The mingling sense told him that there had been at least 4 of them, and knowing Temari's skills, they had to have been shinobi in order to get her in this kind of a position. And if he was any judge, he would say they had done everything that was humanly possible to her. Man, I have got to quit hanging out with Jiraiya. He muttered under his breath as images flashed in his brain. It's normal. You haven't been with a woman in over a year. Shut up. Hey, just telling it like it is, man. She's a looker even in the condition she's in. That's true. Thank you. Whoever did this is so dead when Gaara finds out. Damn, she's Gaara's sister. Yeah, brain dead. Who did you think she was? Shit. Stop looking at her right now. Man, I wasn't in the first place. You brought it up. I was just trying to point out that it's been a while since you've had some fun. I'm your conscience, it's my job. Great. I have a Jiraiya in my head. Tearing himself away from the ridiculous argument he was having with himself, Naruto slipped off his backpack and pulled out his bedroll, which he opened and spread over the unconscious woman. Deciding he needed to find a water source so he could get her cleaned up, he slipped the pack back on, and after carefully wrapping the sleeping bag around Temari, he lifted her into his arms. Naruto had seen the desert nin fight and had even spared with her a few times over the years, so he found it a little disconcerting when he gathered her body tightly to his chest and realized just how small and fragile she was. The first thing Temari became aware of was warmth. How long had it been since she had been this comfortable? Soft material was wrapped around her body and she felt no pain. No pain. Was she dead? The last thing she remembered was the pain exploding through her body as 3 of her captors had started beating her with their bare hands after she had bit off the 4th's ear. He had gotten careless while raping her, yet again. Not having had the strength to do much, she had improvised. So now she was in the afterlife, and to her it felt like heaven rather than the other place. But she wasn't brave enough yet to open her eyes and take in her surroundings. Snuggling farther into her cocoon, she was almost asleep when a mouth-watering scent touched her nose, causing her very empty stomach to growl. Her brow furrowed slightly. Why does heaven smell like roasted fish? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Only her years of training kept her still and unmoving as the heavy footfalls stopped close to her. Temari's body tensed when she felt the person's powerful aura. She couldn't stop the fear from taking hold. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears and her breathing grew shallow and uneven. Stop it. Stop it. He's going to notice you're awake. I can't. She hated the panic she felt, hated feeling weak and helpless. She was Temari, older sister of Sabaku no Gara, 5th Kazekage. She was strong. So why was she cowering like a cornered animal? Because that's exactly what you are. It was the truth, and she hated it. Part of her had been hoping she would die when the beating had started, at least she would have been free. Dried leaves crunched as she sensed him moving closer. Not again. She screamed silently. Knowing that trying to get away would be useless, she prepared for the onslaught by clenching her fists. Pain shot through her left wrist. She bit down on a pained cry, but a small whimper escaped her lips. Gritting her teeth against the throbbing ache, she waited, her eyes still closed. The bastard could try whatever he wanted, but she wasn't going down without a fight. Calloused fingers brushed her bangs aside. Temari. The sand nin didn't move as a large warm palm pressed gently against her forehead. Can you hear me? Why did the Mon's voice sound so familiar? And kind. Come on, Temari, you can do it. That's when it hit her. He knows my name. Her eyes flew open before she could think better of it and instantly clashed with a pair of sky blue eyes. The blue orbs before her were mesmerizing, they filled her vision. Blinking rapidly, Temari tried to get her stunned brain to function again. Hey there. Welcome back to the land of the living. It was the flash of white teeth as he smiled that broke the spell she seemed to be under. Finally, Temari was able to focus on his entire face. Unruly blonde hair fell over a Hittite leaf forehead protector. She had to be dreaming. Naruto. Grinning broadly, he nodded. At least you haven't lost your memory or anything. He teased as he sat back on his heels, removing his hand from her brow. I'm not dreaming, was the only thought that came to mind. Right behind it was disappointment that he had removed his hand. For some reason it had been comforting. What's he doing here? Looks like he's taking care of you. But how did he find me? Why don't you ask him? But her throat was frozen, words refused to come. All she could do was stare at the blonde Konoha shinobi kneeling beside her. After a lengthy silence, she watched Naruto's smile fade and be replaced with a worried frown. How are you feeling, Temari? He inquired gently. His question brought back all of the horror that had been momentarily blocked out by the discovery of his presence. Rolling away from him onto her left side, her eyes darted around for any sign of her abductors. Naruto must have guessed who she was looking for because his calm voice quickly tried to reassure her. You're safe, Temari. They're gone. Gone? What does gone mean? Dead. She could feel the panic coming back and she wasn't really sure why. Feeling vulnerable laying down, she pushed herself into a sitting position. The blanket she was wrapped in made it difficult, so she was forced to put her left hand down for balance. Her injured wrist cracked, causing her to cry out in pain. Almost instantly she felt Naruto's arms wrap around her from behind, holding her upright. She instantly tensed when one large hand curled around her waist, holding her firmly. What hurts? He asked, using a hooked finger to tip her face to look at him. She willed herself not to struggle against his hold, like her instincts were screaming at her too. Temari realized rather quickly by the concerned expression on his face that he had no idea that he was the source of her discomfort, more so than her wrist. His next words confirmed it. I thought I healed all your injuries, what did I miss? She blinked at him. He was so close she could see that his eyes had 2 shades of blue rather than just one, and his lashes were longer than hers. Why was she thinking about things like that? She decided that she was finally starting to crack from all the strain she had been under. That had to be it. Temari. His voice once again brought her back to reality. Wrist. She whispered, unable to utter anything else. Naruto's brow furrowed as he released her chin. Let's have a look. He helped her free her injured limb from the blanket while still keeping the rest of her body wrapped snugly. Temari barely noticed. She was beginning to go numb, her body finally starting to go into shock. When Naruto shifted his position behind her and pulled her closer so that she was propped up against his chest and he wrapped his arms all the way around her, she didn't react. She felt like one of Kankuro's puppets, unable to move on her own. Glancing down, she saw his large hand cradling her smaller pale one. Sorry about this, Temari. Naruto apologized. I forgot to check your arms when I was healing you earlier. He spoke softly. His mouth was right beside her ear as he looked over her shoulder at what he was doing. I'm afraid I'm not that good of a medic yet. He smiled slightly as he brought his left hand over her wrist. A moment later she felt a warm wave of chakra flow into the damaged area. Sakura's going to ream me out for this. He commented in an obvious effort to lighten up the mood. Temari barely heard him. The heat that permeated her wrist was slowly spreading. It was like being immersed in warm water as the sensation traveled through her entire body. With it came a sense of security and peace. Tense muscles started to relax and she took her first deep breath in over a week. Her eyes fluttered shut and her came to rest on Naruto's shoulder. Slowly the realization dawned on her. She was safe. She didn't have to be strong anymore. A part of her was still insisting that she should be afraid of the man who held her. But the more logical part of her mind dismissed it. This was Naruto. The laughing, never serious, fiercely loyal Leaf Shinobi who also happened to be the only man her brother Gaara openly acknowledged as a friend. A tear escaped, then another. By the time Naruto had finished mending her wrist they were falling freely. Is that better? Naruto asked. Her response came out as a strangled sob. A moment later it was followed by another, then the floodgates burst open and there was no stopping it as she began sobbing in earnest. Temari felt Naruto move away from her. She wanted to beg him to stay close to her, but before she could even attempt to say anything, his strong arms lifted her onto his lap and cradled her like a child. It's okay. You're safe now, it's okay. She felt his voice reverberate through his chest as she buried her face into it, pouring out her grief and fear. Her tears soaked his front as she continued to cry hysterically. She only had one coherent thought. I'm safe. Naruto was way out of his league. A hysterically crying woman was not something he was used to dealing with. But here he sat in the middle of nowhere, holding a sanjanan like a child while she soaked the front of his vest and the only thing he could think of doing was mumble reassurances that he wasn't even sure she could hear and stroke her tangled hair. Whether it was helping or not he really had no idea. Time seemed to drag as Temari continued to weep. I wonder if crying is dehydrating. Well duh. Water loss genius. Yeah, but you would think there would be a limit to the amount of tears one has. It took a while but he discovered that there was in fact a limit on tears. Temari's eyes finally dried but her body still quivered slightly as she hiccuped several times. The front of Naruto's vest was definitely wet but he ignored it, material dried. Feel better now? He asked gently. The woman in his arms nodded but still didn't say anything. He wondered absently how long it would take her to realize that he was still holding her and pull away from him. Considering what happened to her, it was a surprise that she let him touch her in the first place. He stilled the hand that was now stoking her back. Are you hungry, Temari? He asked, remembering the fish he had on the fire. She nodded again. Yes. Her voice was barely audible. Naruto smiled to himself and decided it would probably be best if he acted as normal as possible. Gently lifting her off his lap, he set her down beside him. Are you all right sitting by yourself? He inquired, his right arm still supporting her back. Shifting away from him slightly, she nodded again. The sleeping bag she was wrapped in sagged at her movement, bearing one pale shoulder. Without thinking, Naruto carefully pulled it back into place. Temari flinched at his touch but he pretended not to notice and tucked the material back under her chin. We don't want you to catch a cold now. He commented. Her silver eyes meet his and he smiled reassuringly before moving over to the fire. The fish still needed a little more cooking, but the small pot of water was boiling, so he removed it from the flames and dropped some tea into it. Even though he wasn't facing the woman, he could sense every move that she made. "What day is this?" she finally asked quietly. Glancing over his shoulder so he could see her reaction, he replied, "Today is the 28th. It was quite dramatic. Her already pale skin turned ghostly white and her lips started to quiver before she bit down on them to still the movement. She looked like she was going to cry again. Concerned, he moved back to kneel in front of her. Temari. Her unfocused eyes seemed to stare right through him. 16 days, she whispered, her body trembling. Judging from her actions and fact that he could hear her heartbeat and breathing start to increase, Naruto realized that she must be reliving the experience. Damn, that's a hell of a long time to be caught in a nightmare. But now wasn't the time to dwell on her revelation. He needed to get her mind off the event and onto something else. He had intended to stay out of her space until she felt more secure, but he didn't see any other way. Reaching out, he gently trailed his fingers down her cheek. The result was instant. Her eyes snapped to his face, her breath caught and her body went rigid. He hated the reaction, but it was effective, so he pushed his personal feelings aside. "You're going to be fine, Temari. Stay with me now, okay?" He removed his hand, not wanting to upset her any more than he already had. Seconds ticked by. Blue eyes held silver. Finally, Temari took a deep breath and relaxed. One corner of her mouth actually curved slightly upward. "Thank you, Naruto." Grinning broadly, he winked at her. "Any time, babe. Now let's see if the tea is ready." As Naruto moved away from her, Temari took a deep breath to settle her nerves. The Konoha shinobi was right, there was no point in dwelling on what had happened. She was safe now and with someone she trusted, so she was going to be fine, right? She couldn't bring herself to think of the days ahead, so instead she focused on Naruto, who was removing some rather delicious-looking trout from the fire and setting them aside to cool. Temari's stomach grumbled rather loudly and she saw the blonde's mouth twitch as he suppressed a smile. She could feel a slight flush touch her face at the sound, even though she knew there was no reason to be embarrassed about being hungry. Inside the blanket, her right hand automatically moved to her stomach. Skin touched skin and she realized with a start that she was beneath the cloth. Her eyes widened. Did that mean? Naruto. Yeah. She chewed on her lower lip for a moment. What happened to my clothes? She never would have believed it if she hadn't seen it herself, but Uzumaki. Naruto turned beet red. "Well, you see," he stammered, scratching the back of his head. "There really wasn't much left of them when I found you, so I got rid of them while I was healing you." Watching the young man stammer and fidget effectively made Temari forget her own embarrassment over the issue. "So, I get to wear a sleeping bag for a while, do I?" To her surprise, her voice had a light teasing tone to it. Ducking his head away from her, he poured the tea into a tin cup. "I have an extra t-shirt and a pair of boxers you can use for now if you want," he offered without looking at her. "I guess that would work until I get home. Wait a second. Judging by the forest, I'm defiantly not in sand, so where the hell am I?" Naruto made eye contact when she voiced the question. His brow furrowed slightly. "Actually, you're 4 days northeast of Konoha." Temari blinked. 4 days? That meant that the country of sand was on the opposite side of the Leaf Village. She was a long way from home. "I hate to ask, Temari, but what were you doing in the Land of Fire in the first place?" Naruto asked. Her stomach got all queasy at the reminder of her ordeal, but she managed to shove the feeling aside as she answered. "Actually, I was still in sand when I was attacked. I'm afraid I didn't take much notice of where I was after that." "The men who did this?" He paused and she realized that he was trying not to upset her. "They were shinobi, weren't they?" She only nodded as a chill swept through her and she pulled the blanket tighter around her body. Naruto cleared his throat. his expression grave. Were they Leaf? The question surprised her. Not many people would immediately suspect one of their own for such a crime, even if she was on their land. But then she knew Naruto always faced hard tasks head on. He was going to make one hell of a Hokage one day. I believe they were Akatsuki. She informed him. Relief was immediately evident on his face, followed by a shake of his head. I thought we had taken them all out after Itachi was dead. He sighed and she heard him swear under his breath. Temari felt herself tensing up again. He was going to ask her more questions now. She knew he needed to. She knew she needed to answer, but she didn't want to. But when he spoke again, he surprised her by saying instead, I know their sense, so don't worry, I'll get them. His smile was reassuring. There were 4, right? She nodded in confirmation, stunned speechless, and the way he acknowledged her answer with a tip of his head told her he didn't intend to question her farther. Relaxing again, she watched as he rummaged through his pack until he found his extra clothes for her. She found herself almost asking how he knew the number for her attackers, but then realized that it was because of the Kyuubi no Yoko. She knew that, like her brother Gaara, Uzumaki, Naruto had a demon sealed inside of him, so that meant he must also possess the heightened senses as her younger sibling did. Temari shuddered inwardly at the thought of her brother the Kazekage. His reaction when he found out what had happened to her would not be pretty. Are you going to be okay dressing by yourself? Naruto's question jolted her out of her thoughts. He was now standing next to her with the t-shirt and boxers in his hand. I can just turn around, or I can help you into the trees if you would prefer. Yet again he surprised her. She was used to traveling with her brothers and neither one had ever considered her privacy. She either had to demand it or go find it herself. The fact that Naruto asked even though he had already seen her was for some reason strangely reassuring. In the past, Temari would never have hesitated to say that she trusted the Konoha ninja with her life. Now, however, that same phrase had so much more meaning to it. But some privacy would be nice. Can you help me up? She asked, not wanting to risk having the blanket slip when she tried it by herself. Just because he had seen her without her clothes did not mean she wanted to repeat the performance. Draping the clothing over his arm, Naruto reached down and gently wrapped his hands around her waist and lifted her as if she weighed no more than a child. Setting her softly on her feet, he didn't completely release his hold until she was stable. Her legs were sore and weak, but she was pretty sure they would hold her. Thank you. She smiled slightly and he moved away from her. Feeling confident, she took a step. A scream ripped from her throat as pain tore through her lower body. Naruto caught her before she hit the ground as her legs gave out. It felt as if her insides were being ripped and twisted. The pressure from the arm wrapped around her waist was also painful. Unable to get more than a whimper through her clenched teeth, she managed to dig her nails into Naruto's arm. Even through the cloth, it got the message across. There was a part of her brain that took note of how quickly and easily the man holding her repositioned her body and settled her gently back on the ground so her back was supported by his right arm and shoulder. Eyes clamped shut, Temari tried to take deep breaths to help settle her body. The pain brought fresh tears to her eyes. They seeped through her lashes to trail slowly down her cheeks. I've got you, girl. Naruto's soothing voice assured her. A shaky nod was the only answer she was able to give as her left hand slid down to rest on her belly. The motion was automatic, and in a way soothing. The light pressure made no difference in the level of discomfort she felt, so she left it. She wondered how much internal damage had been done. It had to be a lot, more than once she had fainted from the pain during the repeated rapes. Will I ever heal completely? There will probably be a lot of scarring. Will I be able to have children after this? Where the thought came from she wasn't quite sure, but it filled her with panic. Regardless of the macho persona she exhibited to the world, she had always silently dreamed of the day she would have a family of her own. Funny that she would still think of it after what she had gone through. She jumped and Naruto's hand came to rest lightly on top of her own, effectively interrupting her thoughts. I'm not very good at this, but let's see what I can do. He murmured as once again his warm chakra flowed into her body. Her eyes remained closed as she turned her face into his chest. His aura seemed to surround her, cloaking her in a safe, comforting haven. The pain slowly leaked away to nothing. This feeling of security was new to her. Even at home, with her siblings and her people, she had never felt it. Even after everything that had happened to her, the fact that she felt like this with a man that was really little more than an acquaintance, was amazing to her. Bastards. Naruto's muttered oath caused her eyes to flutter open. The first thing she saw was his large hands still hovering over her stomach. After her earlier fears about her condition, she found herself wondering why she felt no panic or dread after the male ninja's reaction to whatever it was he was sensing inside of her belly. There was a strange feeling of being disconnected from what was happening, as if she was hovering on the sidelines and not actually involved. What's wrong? Even her voice sounded strange. Naruto sighed heavily. There is a lot of damage. I can stop the bleeding where the tissue tore again, but I haven't learned how to fix the type of internal swelling and damage you have. His chin came to rest on the top of her head. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize. The pain's gone and that's all I care about. Was that really her talking so calmly? Well, that's something. He pulled away from her suddenly but carefully. She felt like she had been doused with a bucket of cold water while she was sleeping. She was definitely awake now. Let's get you dressed so we can get some food into you. With that, he pulled the t-shirt over her head before she could protest. Don't worry, my eyes are closed, he assured her as he pulled the material down so she could shrug out of the blanket and into the shirt without even exposing any skin. The boxers were a little more of a challenge as she still had trouble moving without causing herself too much pain. Naruto seemed to know exactly what he was doing, and the feat was finally accomplished with the minimum of skin revealed, and Naruto wrapped her up in the sleeping bag again and set her closer to the fire. She gave him a questioning look. Her body temperature was far from cold at that point in time. Embarrassment tended to do that to her. Naruto didn't seem to notice, however. There's a storm coming. Best stay warm and dry while you can, he told her as he handed her the cup of tea he had poured earlier and a fish on a stick. It will take us a couple days to get back to Konoha. Do you want me to send a messenger ahead so Tsunade can inform Gaara that you're safe? Naruto asked as he seated himself and grabbed a fish for himself. Temari thought it over for a moment. As she took her first bite of food, it tasted very good. Now she was getting sidetracked. There's no need, I was only due back yesterday, so I doubt they have missed me yet. It was sad but true, she always felt as if her brothers could care less if she was around or not. You were on a mission. No, a personal training trip. I take one a couple times a year. Gaara lets you go on your own? Naruto asked, a surprised look on his face. Why wouldn't he? The question irritated her. She was a Jonin, for crying out loud. Did he think she needed her little brother to hold her hand all the time? Naruto didn't seem to notice her agitation, he just shrugged. I'm surprised is all. He's just so protective, afraid that something might happen to you. Temari stared at the leaf ninja, her anger forgotten. Had he actually just used the words, Gaara, and, afraid, in the same sentence when it wasn't referring to someone's fear of her brother? Gaara didn't have emotions like that, did he? There is going to be hell to pay when the spook finds out what was done to you, Naruto commented as he snagged a second fish. Temari ignored the small reference to the last 2 weeks and instead focused on resisting the urge to stuff all of her food into her mouth at once. She had had barely enough food and water to survive on during her kidnapping, and she knew her stomach wouldn't be able to handle a large quantity of food at once, so she made a point of eating slowly. As she chewed, she wondered if there was any possible way she could keep the worst of her capture a secret from her brothers. She didn't want to face Kankuro's sympathy of Gaara's anger. Or worse yet, pity from either of them. Naruto, you said you healed up my wounds. He nodded. How bad were they? You don't want to know. That bad, huh? Worse, you should be dead. He informed her. She merely nodded in understanding. After all, when she first woke up, she had thought she was dead. Temari quietly finished off her trout as she wondered if she should be having a little more of a reaction to the news of her near-death experience. Now that she thought of it, she did seem to be a little off in a few other areas as well. Her emotions and reactions seemed to be all mixed up, and for some reason that didn't bother her. Part of her was definitely feeling a little numb. Would you like another fish? Naruto asked, once again breaking into her thoughts. Please. He handed her the food, then settled back with a bowl he was using as a teacup. After you're done eating, we'll head back to Konoha if you're up to it. She nodded, then a thought struck her. You said your village is 4 days from here. Are you on a mission? The blonde man shrugged. It's kind of a working vacation, nothing very important. He grinned. Actually, I think Tsunade just wanted me out from underfoot for a while, so she sent me to pick up some crop reports. Temari blinked at him. Crop reports? Surely there is something more important for the Hokage's successor to do than that. Naruto chuckled good-naturedly. When the old lady wants me out of the way, she will use any excuse handy. He's so different from either of my brothers. I wonder if he ever gets mad. Temari mused. Finding that she was enjoying the conversation, the first she'd had in several weeks, she asked. So where is your destination? Several settlements north of here. One should be only a couple hours away, I think. And you want to turn around now? He shrugged. You're more important than reports. His statement floored her. She knew he wasn't trying to be flirty or sweet or anything, it was just how he thought. But to a girl who always put herself last and had seldom been praised or even acknowledged while growing up, it was the best compliment she had ever had. That is really sad, you know. Shut up, Naruto. There is really no reason you can't get the reports. What's another day? Where the hell is this coming from? Well, I would prefer to have you to a hospital sooner rather than later. Is the remaining damage life-threatening? Or altering? You forgot altering. I don't think so. He was giving her a bit of a funny look. Then what's the big deal? I think you've gone off your rocker. You're still very sore and can't even walk. I'm a ninja, I'll live. I don't want you to have to make the same trip twice just because you helped me. Ooh, you need help, all right. But I really could use a hot bath, and the sooner the better. She interrupted him. At least that part is true. Naruto stared at her with his head to one side. Temari found it a little unsettling, but she ignored the feeling and met his gaze head on. She also completely ignored the little voice in her head that was telling her she was crazy. I guess the creek water was a little cold. He mumbled. What was that? His comment didn't make any sense to her. Nothing. He turned away from her but wasn't quick enough to conceal the blush on his cheeks. Naruto. Temari growled, using her best older sibling voice. What you said was instead of is. Why? Does it matter? Why what? Uzumaki, I'm warning you, answer the question. Now she was starting to get a little irritated. A little, ha. He was trying to hide something, but what? Okay, fine. He grumbled. You were a mess last night, so I gave you a sponge bath. He refused to look at her and kept his head down. Temari had to admit she was too floored to be self-conscious or even angry. After all that, Naruto was embarrassed about giving her a bath. It would have been funny if the situation wasn't what it was. Then another thought registered. You found me yesterday. Yup, was the only reply as he started packing. Then got to his feet and smothered the fire by kicking dirt into it. His actions made it impossible to ask anything further, so she quickly finished her meal while Naruto moved about the campsite, making sure no trace of their presence was left behind. Ready? He asked finally. Wiping her mouth on blanket, she nodded, then attempted to roll onto her hands and knees. Before she could get that far, however, she found herself along with the sleeping bag scooped up into Naruto's arms. A startled squeak escaped her lips as she stared up at him. There's no sense you hurting yourself again. He pointed out. She had to admit he was right, but it just felt so strange being held in his powerful arms like she was some kind of china doll. The strangest part being the fact that it didn't frighten her like it would have even an hour before. Are you sure about continuing on? He asked, concern clear in his voice. Definitely not, she informed him as she pushed her inner voice aside and reached down to rearrange the blanket to cover her legs, which had been bared in the motion of his lifting her up. Okay, he breathed. With a powerful surge of his legs, he leapt onto the nearest tree branch. Temari inhaled sharply as the landing jolted her body painfully, even though she was sure Naruto had landed softly. Are you alright? He asked, having obviously heard the sound. Sorry, I wasn't thinking. Hold on, there will be one more jolt. With that, he dropped to the ground before Temari could even reply. The second bump wasn't as bad, but she still felt it. Naruto started walking as soon as he landed, his long strides eating up the ground. You're sure you want to go through with this? He asked. I'm sure. Another day or so won't matter, she assured him. I probably haven't even been missed yet. What? Gaara's deadly calm voice had more effect than any shout would have been. Kankuro had to forcefully remind himself not brace his body for an impact like he felt the 8 ninjas standing behind him doing. What do you mean you can't find her? Gaara asked through his teeth. It was the only physical sign that his brother was angry. The puppet master was careful to choose his next words wisely. He knew his younger sibling could snap at any moment. He didn't know if he had ever seen Gaara this upset in his life. We went to Temari-chan's usual training grounds, but found no sign of her. Kankuro was careful to keep his voice steady. He too was starting to worry for his sister, but he knew that if he let that emotion color his voice, his brother would probably lose it. We searched the surrounding area but found nothing to indicate that she was ever there at all, he informed the Hokage. There was a soft whispering sound that was nearly drowned out by Gaara's voice. Onezen was due back 3 days ago, he growled. Kankuro nodded. The whisper grew louder and he saw sand starting to raise from the cracks in the floorboards and slowly begin to swirl around the feet of those present. I want every available man searching until she is found, the Hokage instructed. But Hokage-sama, Kankuro deliberately used the title to remind Gaara of his responsibilities. If all of our people are searching, who will watch over the village? Gaara snarled and the sand sprung to life and whipped around the room like it had been caught in a tornado. Do you not think I can sufficiently guard this place? He asked, his eyes narrowing. Of course, but if there is an emergency and everyone is gone, you're not joining the search party. The painted man was rather surprised. His red-headed brother usually used any excuse he could find to escape the confines of his office. Kankuro stopped speaking when he felt the sand start to pool around his feet. This is an emergency, Gaara informed him with a growl. I will direct the search from here. Now get moving. The 8 men standing behind the puppet master rushed to the door as one, the sand swirling about their feet, frantic to put distance between themselves and their volatile leader. But the painted Jonin stayed a moment longer. I'm sure Arne-chan is fine, Gaara, he assured the redhead before turning and exiting the office with much more poise than his men had. The sand was gone before he had closed the door behind him. If he acts like this when she is only late, what will he do if something has happened to her? He could easily imagine heads rolling and blood flying. You better be safe, Temari, wherever you are. We're staying here, Shukaku asked, a little surprised. It is here. We will learn of her whereabouts as soon as she is found. Gaara pointed out to the Tanuki. I see your point. The demon agreed. Do you think we should send word to our allies and ask for assistance? We cannot. I do not wish to alarm Konoha just yet. You're afraid of what he might say, aren't you? It was not a question. He would not be condemning if that is what you're thinking. Gaara sighed. To think I have been so careful of her safety all these years. To fail now of all times. He hung his head. It was a standard training getaway, nothing she has not done before. Shukaku reminded him. Your Onezin is a very powerful female, she can take anything an enemy could possibly throw at her. True, but I am still worried. We were planning on taking her to Konoha with us when she got back. I remember, the time is definitely getting close. That damn vision of yours is starting to wear me out, you know. Do not worry, old friend, we will get Temari safely home, then see to it that she is taken to where she belongs. And about bloody time too. Sighing contentedly, Temari slid farther into the hot bath water, until only her nose and the top of her head was above the steaming liquid. She almost felt like her old self again. Looking around the plain bathroom of the farmhouse she had stayed at since the day before she replayed the crazy events of the last 2 days. As it turned out, Naruto's estimation for how long it would take them to reach civilization had not taken into account the much slower pace he had to restrict himself to because of her. They ended up getting caught in the rainstorm Naruto had sensed coming and spent the night in a tree. Temari felt her cheeks start to heat at the memory. She had managed to relieve herself without any assistance. Then, after sharing some dried biscuits and jerky from Naruto's pack, the leaf nin had scooped her up and hopped into the thick branches of an old fir tree. He had then settled down with her on his lap and informed her that since he hadn't brought a tent with him, the shared body heat would keep her warmer. Much to her surprise, she had quickly fallen asleep in his arms and did not stir until the morning light woke her. 2 hours later, Naruto found a small farm, and after introducing them, he had asked if Temari could stay with the family while he went to collect the crop reports from the surrounding area. It still amazed her that the farmer had agreed so easily. The mont's wife had even helped Temari get cleaned up and gave her a kimono to wear, then helped brush out her tangled hair. Naruto had left with the promise to return as soon as he could, and before he left he had slipped a pair of shuriken into her hand. Her eyes moved to the weapons that now rested within easy reach on the side of the tub. Looking at them made her smile. She had slept relatively well on her own in the small room given to her with the deadly knives tucked under her pillow. Earlier this afternoon, Temari had received a surprise visitor. An old woman around the age of 70 arrived, and after introducing herself as Anna, she informed Temari that she had met Naruto in the nearby village, and when he had learned that she was a retired medic nin, had asked her to stop by and check on Temari. The Sanjonin had been absolutely stunned at the gesture but was glad Naruto had thought of it. Anna had healed the damage done to her private parts so that now Temari was able to move about without pain. Although still weak from the loss of blood, she felt 100 times better. The only part of the session that she hadn't liked was when the old woman had informed her that she needed to see a medic nin about a pregnancy test as soon as she got home. I'm a little out of practice, my dear, so it's too early for me to tell if you are or not. Anna had told her, her voice kind. Best to be sure you know. Temari had yet to decide how she felt about that possibility. For now she was determined to put the whole thing out of her mind and worry about it when the time came. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the bathroom door. A moment later, the farmer's wife stepped into the room. I brought you some new clothes. Temari was surprised. She had already been given the kimono to use. Why give her more clothes? Your young man is back and brought you these from town. The woman explained, as if hearing her silent question and setting the clothing on a small stool that stood beside the sink. The young woman was thankful that her cheeks were already flushed from the hot water. It hid her blush. We're just friends, she informed the woman, not wanting anyone to get the wrong idea about her and Naruto. Although she had to admit it was easy to make that assumption, he was being extremely thoughtful. Not even her brothers on their best days would have thought of bringing her new clothes without her asking for them. The woman tisked, drawing Temari's attention. That's too bad. Is he attached? She asked after a moment. Temari shrugged. I have no idea. Are you attached, dear? No, I'm not. Her brow furrowed in confusion. What did it matter? If you ask me, I think that you should find out if that boy is available. And if he is, you should grab him. Temari felt her face flame. What a mortifying thought, especially considering how he had found her. Why would I want to do that? She snapped. She couldn't bring herself to feel guilty for speaking harshly to the woman. She was being way too nosy. The woman chuckled as she headed for the door. Take it from me, girl, that is one very fine young man. We call his kind a keeper, and they are very hard to come by. Before the speechless ninja could think of anything to say, the door closed and she was once again alone. Hook up with Naruto. She has got to be kidding. She is right, you know, he is a keeper. That's not the point, I'm hardly in any position to go manhunting. Why? For one, I don't know if I'll be able to even stand having a man touch me any time in the near future. You don't seem to mind Naruto's arms wrapped around you. That's different. He was carrying me because I couldn't walk, you idiot. Carrying, touching, same thing. It is not. You stupid. URG. Ha, you wouldn't be getting so worked up if I was wrong. I have just lived through being beaten and raped by 4 men. What makes you think that I would be even remotely interested in getting involved with another one? Not just any man, Naruto. You are nuts. Just think of his body, so well muscled, that broad chest, those string arms. Yummy. Stop it. Why? Temari started to quiver. Even if talking to herself was a normal occurrence, the inner voice that she had always just assumed was her conscience had never had this much to say about anything. And it was now starting to scare her. Can I just say one more thing? What? You've felt the amount of strength and power that boy has in that big body of his, and you've seen what he can do with that power firsthand. Why's? And despite the fact that he has a demon sealed inside of him, has he ever threatened or harmed you in any way? The voice then fell silent, leaving the blonde sand nin to wonder if she was going crazy. That was it. The trauma from her ordeal was finally sinking in. Why else would she even be entertaining the thought of starting a relationship with someone? Especially when there was the possibility that she might be pregnant. And that thought brought her back full circle to what she had been trying to avoid thinking about in the first place. Now agitated, she ran her fingers through her silver blonde hair and cursed under her breath. She was off kilter. It was like her world had been strapped to a spinning top and been flung in 100 different directions. And now she had to try to pull herself back together, one piece at a time. The problem was, could she do it? I can. I'm still alive, I've been trained to handle these kinds of things. I just need to take it one step at a time. She whispered to herself. A knock sounded on the door, causing her to jump. Temari. Naruto's voice called through the wooden barrier. Yes. She shrank lower into the water, then berated herself. It's not like he can see through walls. I was sent to tell you that dinner's ready. The young man told her. Thank you, I'll be right down. She called back and was pleased to hear that her voice sounded steady. She didn't move as she listened to his footsteps retreat down the hall. Several minuets ticked by before Temari realized she was still frozen like a scared rabbit. The realization made her angry. She had never been a weak and sniveling female. She had stood beside her brothers as an equal against some of the most deadly ninja in all the 5 lands. Setting her jaw firmly, she closed her eyes and ducked under the water. Her hair swirled around her head like silken fingers. For a brief moment the young woman was transported to another world. One of silence and peace. Of quiet power and renewing strength. In this world the desire to succeed, to continue on, to triumph was revived and solidified. It was here that the flaxen-haired beauty vowed to reclaim the shattered pieces of her world and put them back together. No matter how long it took. Burning lungs forced the return to the real world. In one smooth, graceful moment she came to her feet, like a selkie rising from the depths. Water fell in glistening cascades from her pale body. Golden lashes parted and a pair of silver eyes looked out on the world with a new determination. Naruto slowly ambled along the moonlit path on the way back to the farm. The evening had gone quite well as far as he was concerned. Temari had thanked him for her new clothes and he was relieved that they seemed to fit okay. A little loose, but then he knew she was underweight, so he had bought them that size on purpose. He also had the feeling that she wouldn't want to show off any more of her body than she had to right now. The old medic Nin Anna had stayed for dinner at the farm and Naruto had gotten a chance to get to know her. He liked the way she was so blunt and straightforward when she talked. After dinner he had escorted her home despite her protests. Part of the reason being he wanted to thank her for what she had done, but the other had been because he needed to put some distance between himself and Temari. Seeing the sand kunoichi all fresh and glowing from her bath had unsettled him. He wasn't quite sure why. She had a scent to her that he found familiar yet couldn't place it with her usual smell. Was that the only reason? He wasn't sure then, and not even after having more time to think about it. He had other things on his mind now, however. As he had left Anna at the door of her home, she had said something rather strange to him. "Watch over that girl, she's going to need you to stay close to her." He had assured the old woman that he would care for her until she rejoined her family. "Her brothers can't help her like you can," she had informed him before closing the door in his face. Naruto had no idea what the woman had been talking about. Half an hour later he was still stumped. Finally he shrugged it off. Temari was a friend and he would help her in any way he could. Returning to the cozy farmhouse, he was greeted cheerfully by the farmer and his wife. Temari had already gone to bed, and after visiting for a few minuets Naruto decided to do the same. He was directed to his room and he walked in without turning on the light. Moving to the bed that he could just make out in the darkness, he sat down to remove his sandals. He felt something hard beneath him, then there was a startled squeak causing him to scramble off the bed. Tripping over his own feet, he landed on the floor with a crash. Scrambling back to his feet, he hit the lamp on the bedside table, turning it on. To his shock, he saw Temari cowering against the wall with a shuriken in hand, blinking at the sudden bright light. "Geez, Temari, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were in here." He apologized profusely. "I must have misunderstood the directions." Chuckling nervously, he scratched the back of his head as he wondered how to lower the tension in the room. Slowly the sand nin relaxed, letting the covers she had clutched to her chin fall into her lap. "You just startled me, no harm done." She smiled at him, but he could tell it was a little wobbly. He also noticed that she was wearing the t-shirt he had given her. "Is she wearing my boxers too? What a stupid thing to think of at a time like this." "At a time like what? I'll be leaving now." He started backing towards the door before he did or said something stupid. "Actually," Temari's voice stopped him. "Now that I think about it, I don't think you have the wrong room." "I don't. Why would she say that? I believe that there are only 3 rooms." As she spoke, she climbed out of bed and walked past him to peek out the door and down the hall. "She is wearing my boxers, even if the shirt almost covers them." Why his brain was hell-bent on pointing out that she was in his clothes, now of all times, he couldn't fathom. Maybe he needed to find some female companionship when he got home. "Why wait? What? You have got to be insane. I'm not making a pass at Temari." "Why not? She's got a killer bod, as you well know. I'm not having this conversation with you right now." "I was right," Temari announced. What?" Naruto mumbled, unsure of what she was talking about, and hoping she wouldn't notice as he tried to pull his thought process away from the beautiful body hidden beneath his borrowed shirt and boxers. "There are only 3 bedrooms," Temari clarified as she quietly closed the door. "Oh, that meant he was supposed to sleep with Temari." "Yes. That's not what I meant." "Sure it is, besides there is only 1 bed." The voice inside his head was practically singing with glee. Said bed was only a single. While it was possible for the 2 of them to fit on, it would put them in very close proximity. "So, you were closer the other night. That was for health reasons. Just keep telling yourself that. I'll sleep outside," Naruto told the woman next to him. As he moved to go around her, he felt a hand on his chest, stopping him. "Naruto, You can't sleep outside, it was raining earlier. It will be cold and damp out there. Temari's brows were slightly furrowed with concern. Don't worry about it, I've slept out in worse weather than this, he assured her. Temari started to worry her lower lip with her teeth. Oh God, don't do that. He felt his body start to react and cursed himself. He was in. I think I should sleep outside. But, he raised a hand to stop her protest. I don't want to make you uncomfortable, and I wouldn't want to give our hosts the wrong idea either. Bullshit. Temari shook her head at him. I already set them straight about our relationship, she assured him. And besides, I would feel guilty having you outside. I couldn't possibly sleep knowing you were out there because of me. Naruto sighed. He had the feeling this conversation would go on all night if he let it. Temari could be very stubborn at times. I'll sleep on the floor then, he announced. After all, he had enough self-control to stay there. Party pooper. Are you sure? Temari asked. He noticed her cheeks were a bit flushed and she was starting to fidget a bit. I mean, I can, or we could, share. She was babbling a bit and he knew she was only offering because she felt bad putting him out of a soft warm bed. Naruto gently took hold of her elbow and steered her over to the futon. I'm used to sleeping on the floor, he assured her. I fall out of bed all the time. That was a lie, but he was trying to lighten the mood. Besides, I'm a cover hog, so you'll be much more comfortable without me. Setting her on the bed, he reached down to lift her legs onto the mattress and carefully maneuvered her so she was laying down, then shook out her blanket before tucking the material around her. Good night, Temari. Removing his jacket, he rolled it up to use as a pillow. I have an extra here. Temari handed him a pillow. Thanks. Settling down on the floor, he reached up and switched off the light. Shaking out the jacket, he used it to cover his shoulders, then rolled onto his side and relaxed. Night, Naruto. Temari's soft voice drifted to him in the dark. He hummed a reply and put a choke hold on the voice that was suggesting that he change his mind and climb into bed with her. In the silence, he was finally able to recognize the voice in his head. And it wasn't his conscience either. I'm still not talking to you, Kyubi. He growled silently. Geez, Kit, it's been 6 years. The demon fox whined. Off. You ruined my life. I'm never talking to you again. Silence was all that greeted that statement. Satisfied that he had shut the kitsune up, Naruto lay awake until he heard Temari breathing evenly in her sleep. Tsunade tapped her nails on her desk in irritation as she glared at the Jonin sitting across from her. Hitaki, Kakashi was nearly falling off his chair from laughing. She was just about ready to beat the tar out of the silver-haired nin when he finally managed to calm himself down. Forgive me, Hokage, I'm afraid your request caught me by surprise. Kakashi chuckled, his one eye sparkling. Tsunade could tell he was still trying to keep from bursting into laughter again. I don't find anything about this mission funny, she growled. Maybe she should still hit him. But you must admit, it is not a task a Jonin would expect to be asked to do, he pointed out as he leaned back in his seat and folded his arms across his chest in his usual laid-back manner. I don't think it's that strange, she informed the copy ninja as she carefully and deliberately folded her hands on the desk in an attempt to seem as calm about the whole conversation as Kakashi now seemed to be. You want me to find a wife for Naruto? How is that not strange? Kakashi asked, his one visible eyebrow raised in query. I said I wanted you to find a nice girl for him, I didn't say a wife. They wouldn't have to get married. At least not right away. But you still want him married, so it's the same thing, he pointed out. That's not the point. I want him happy, the Hokage snapped. And you don't think he's happy? I think he's lonely. The scarecrow shrugged. He always has been. I'm sure when he's ready to settle down he'll find someone. After all, he's only 25. But Naruto's not even dating. Tsunade protested. I haven't seen him with a girl in years. So that's what this is about. Kakashi chuckled. You're worried he might be swinging the other way. Tsunade's eyebrows shot into her hair. What? If Naruto decides to go for a male partner, you won't get the grandkids you've been wanting. Kakashi nodded as if he had figured everything out. It took the Hokage a moment to realize he was joking. You, she shrieked, grabbing one of her paperweights, which happened to be a rock, and hurled it at the smirking shinobi's head. And he was smirking behind his mask, she could tell by the way his eye was sparkling. Kakashi easily caught the projectile before it could connect with its target. Is everything all right, Hokage-sama? Shizune, Tsunade's assistant, asked as she popped her head through the office door. Fine, fine, we were just having a difference of opinion. Tsunade assured her friend as she waved her back out the door. In all seriousness, Tsunade, I think Naruto should be left to his own devices in this matter. The silver-haired Jonin commented as soon as the door closed again. Well, I don't think he should. The Hokage snapped, once again glaring at him. Then why don't you ask Yumino, Iruka, to help you out? He's a lot closer to Naruto than I am. Iruka is busy with the academy and doesn't have time for this kind of undertaking. You mean he said no? Kakashi concluded out loud. Tsunade smirked. Actually, he said he would love to help, but he just has too much on his plate right now. Kakashi sighed and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. There's one thing you may have overlooked in this plan. And what might that be? The fact that most of the single women in Konoha won't even give the boy the time of day, let alone look at him as husband material. Tsunade shook her head in disbelief. What are you talking about? Naruto is, dare I say, one of the best shinobi Konoha has ever seen. He's going to be the Hokage very soon. That is true, and everyone who knows him well, knows he is kind, loyal, and one who can always be counted on. But the fact remains that he is still the vessel of the nine-tailed demon fox. What the hell does that have to do with anything? That fact was made public knowledge years ago, it's no longer an issue. In general, no, it's not. But there are few women who would willingly get involved with someone they believe to be influenced by a demon. And the ones that are not exactly settling down type. Tsunade was slightly confused. Everyone liked Naruto, he was just that kind of guy. You're a little behind the times, Kakashi. After all, what about Jewel? She smirked slightly. The scarecrow wasn't going to worm out of this assignment. You mean Naruto's last girlfriend? Kakashi asked. That's the one. The one who broke up with him about 5 or so years ago and hasn't been seen or heard of since. Tsunade was momentarily speechless. Had it really been that long ago? Once again, Kakashi folded his arms. Look, the fact is that rumors never die, they just quiet down. Naruto would never have done anything to that girl. Tsunade hissed. You and I know that, as do his friends. But try and tell that to some of the other people in the village. Kakashi's voice was now deadly serious. There is no way you'll find a woman in Konoha who is willing to take that kind of chance. Half an hour later, Tsunade was still too upset to focus on any of the paperwork in front of her. How the hell did I miss all the shit my boy has had to deal with? I thought things were better than they used to be. Jewel, she knew, had left Konoha of her own accord, although the Hokage had no idea why. Obviously, the girl's mysterious disappearance had made more of a ripple than Tsunade had originally thought it had. Maybe it was time for her to sit down and have a very serious talk with Naruto. Tsunade was not someone who liked being kept in the dark about anything. Kakashi had made a couple more interesting comments before absolutely refusing to interfere in Naruto's love life. The why bastard. She grumbled silently. He can be such a pain. Replaying the entire conversation in her mind, something about the copy ninja's attitude suddenly struck her. When did he get to be such a defiant smart ass? Naruto was glad to see the familiar landmarks indicating that he was nearing Konoha. Temari was asleep on his back. Although her injuries had been healed, she was still very weak, so he had been carrying her off and on for the last 4 days. On a trip that would normally only take him a day and a half. He was glad that he had been able to talk the Sand Nin into letting him carry her while she rested. As soon as she fell asleep, he was able to travel almost 3 times faster than they did while she was awake and walking on her own. It wasn't that he wanted to get rid of her, he actually had enjoyed talking to her as they traveled. But the sooner they got to Konoha, the sooner he could get her safely home to her brothers. Then he had some bastards to hunt down and kill. On the first night out, Temari had bedded down on the ground in a small shelter while Naruto took to the trees, sleeping comfortably in the branches. He hadn't bothered to buy a second sleeping bag as summer was now in full swing and he didn't need one. In the middle of the night he awoke to the sound of Temari screaming in her sleep. It had taken a couple of minuets to wake her from her nightmare and over an hour to get her calmed down. She had clung to him until exhaustion took over, but before sleep claimed her, she had told him every detail of what happened to her. Even thinking about it now, 4 days later he still saw red. Those 4 were the Walking Dead, they just didn't know it yet. He would take great pleasure in ripping them to pieces. And since Temari had made him promise not to tell anyone the whole story of what happened to her. Partly, she said, because she did not want Gaara destroying everything in his path on his way to avenging her. Naruto wasn't convinced that that was the real reason behind her request, but he had given his word anyway. Of course, he could have pointed out that he was the only one who knew the attacker's sense, so he was the only one who could track them down with any certainty. The gates of the village hidden in the leaves finally came into view and Naruto slowed his pace to a walk. He debated waking Temari. She seemed so comfortable. Her soft breath warmed the side of his neck and he had to admit that he liked the sensation. He liked having her close. After that first night he had slept with her wrapped in his arms, she said it made her feel safe. It had only been 4 days and 3 nights, but he was going to miss holding her. It had been a very long time since he had last fallen asleep beside a woman. And he couldn't deny that he missed it. After greeting the Anbu guards and inquiring where the Hokage was, Naruto headed for the tower with Temari still asleep on his back. 88. Temari was roused by the sound of voices, a woman's voice as well as Naruto's. Because she was pressed to his back, she could feel his deep voice vibrate through his chest when he spoke. She smiled slightly. It was a very comforting sensation and she really didn't want to open her eyes to see where they were. Knowing it was inevitable, she stifled a yawn and slowly lifted her lashes. Welcome back to the waking world. Naruto greeted with a lopsided smile as he turned his head slightly towards her. He was so close, their faces almost touched. He had the most amazing eyes. Wait a sec, where did that thought come from? Before she could feel self-conscious about where her waking thoughts had wandered, another voice interrupted. Welcome to Temari-san, it is good to see you again. With a start, the Sand Nin realized that Hokage of the Leaf Village was standing in front of them. Hokage-sama, Temari greeted, bowing her head slightly. How long have we been here? She asked Naruto nervously. We only just arrived, he assured her as he slowly let her slide off his back. Her legs were a little wobbly when her feet first touched down, and for a moment she was afraid that they wouldn't hold her weight. However, before that theory could be tested, Naruto's arm wrapped around her waist, supporting her against his side. She smiled at him, grateful for the help. She placed a hand on his shoulder for balance as she moved slowly towards the nearest chair. His arm remained around her until she had settled down on the seat. When he moved away from her to face the Hokage, she immediately missed the warmth of his body. To Temari's relief, he didn't go far. He stood half behind her chair with his left hand resting on the back, supporting her even though they were no longer touching. Are you alright, Temari-chan? Tsunade asked. Starting guiltily, Temari moved her attention to the woman standing before her. She couldn't believe that for a moment she had forgotten that she was in the Hokage's presence. Said Hokage was giving her a strange look. The Sand Nin wasn't sure if it was concern or something else. I'm fine, Hokage-sama. I'm afraid I just haven't gotten all my strength back yet. Tsunade lifted a questioning eyebrow. I found Temari-san badly injured on my way to pick up the reports you asked for. Naruto informed her. He then pulled out several scrolls from his pouch. Temari felt herself tensing as the Konoha leader moved around her large desk and took a seat. Placing the scrolls aside, Tsunade folded her hands together and looked expectantly at Naruto. Here it comes. Temari thought. All the questions. Naruto's eyes meet hers, silently asking permission. She nodded. She was pretty sure if she tried to tell the story she would get upset. As Naruto started the report, she found herself wishing that she had asked him not to tell anyone about the rape part of her ordeal, instead of just Gaara. It wasn't until she heard him describe the farm they had stayed at that she realized that the tall shinobi had indeed skipped that part of the story. Filled with relief, Temari slumped back in her chair. She couldn't say why she didn't want anyone else to know, at least not yet. She needed time to analyze everything first. And you think they were Akatsuki? Tsunade asked, dragging Temari back from her musings. Yes, Hokage-sama, but I cannot be sure as most of them kept their forehead protectors covered. Tsunade nodded thoughtfully before standing. I'm sure you would like a hot bath and something to eat, so I won't detain you any longer. She motioned to Naruto. Find Temari-san a hotel room and I will send word to the San that she is safe. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Temari got to her feet and bowed. Tsunade made a shooing motion with her hands. Naruto, I'll see you tomorrow. Yes, Mom. Naruto offered Temari his arm, which she gladly accepted. It felt like her legs couldn't decide if they were asleep or awake, so she now had a tingling sensation in both. I'll buy you supper. Naruto offered as he opened the door, then picked up his pack that was lying next to it. Temari wondered absently how he had carried it with her on his back. You don't have to do that, Naruto. She assured him. After all the trouble he had already gone through for her, she couldn't imagine imposing on him anymore. Oh yes, I do. Naruto stated. Consider it your reward for having to eat my cooking for the last 4 days. He grinned. That was cooking? Temari asked playfully as she returned the smile. Ouch. Naruto chuckled as he pulled the Hokage's door closed behind them. Tsunade watched the door close on the two young people and grinned. Maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to find a girl for Naruto after all. Smiling as if she had learned a great secret, the Hokage steepled her fingers and tapped them against her ruby-painted lips. In all the time she had known the boy, she had never seen him so protective. Maybe protective was the wrong word, she amended. After all, Naruto was very protective of the people of Konoha, especially his friends. But the way he had hovered over San Kunoichi was different. It was hard to put a name on it. Tender. Caring. Dare she hope. Loving. Pulling out a blank scroll, Tsunade rang for Shizune and began to write a letter to the Kazakage of the Sand. Yes, Tsunade-sama. Shizune poked her head through the door. I have a message that needs to be delivered to the Sand village. Call a messenger, please. Right away, Hokage. Shizune's head disappeared before she was even finished speaking. Tsunade worded her letter very carefully. She wanted to see what would happen if Naruto and Temari were given a little more time together. Without the girl's overly protective brothers hanging around. But she also did not want to alarm Gaara and thus have him roar to the Leaf Village to reclaim his sister. To that end, she kept it simple, explaining that Temari had been found injured, but was recovering well and was welcome to stay until all her strength returned, at which time the Leaf Village could escort her home, or she could wait until Gaara was free to come and pick her up himself. The messenger arrived, so Tsunade quickly read over the letter one final time before sealing it and handing it over to the young man. The messenger bowed and quickly left. Tsunade smiled again and mentally gave herself a pat on the back. If all went well, she would live to see a whole bunch of little blonde-haired, blue-eyed ninjas running around Konoha. She let herself picture that for a few minuets before reluctantly going back to the papers on her desk. A slight frown replaced the smile on her lips as she recalled Naruto and Temari's revelation about the possible resurfacing of the Akatsuki. With a sigh she buzzed Shizune again, at least she wasn't having any trouble with the sand. Kankuro grimly walked towards his brother who stood at the peak of a sand dune, surveying the rolling desert that surrounded them. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the land. The painted man knew that before the ball of fire had completely disappeared there was a good chance that blood would be shed. Every shinobi of the sand had been out searching for Temari for the last 5 days and had found no trace of the kunoichi, until now. Gaara. The redhead did not immediately turn, he stood like a statue, the setting sun causing his face to be shadowed, giving him a haunted look. This was just found, Kankuro informed him, holding out the object in his hands. 8. Gaara slowly turned to face his brother. Having finally grown impatient sitting in his office, he had been using his power to control sand to try to find some trace of his sister. The demon vessel now knew where every one of the ninja under his command stood in the desert. But still there was no sign of his Onezen. He could feel the tension coming from Kankuro's body even before he focused on the puppet master. Gaara's aquamarine eyes immediately fell on the mangled piece of metal in his brother's hands. He instantly recognized it as what was left of Temari's giant fan. It felt like his heart had stopped beating as he reached for the remnants of the weapon. A sensation that he had never felt in his life. The cold steel sent a chill up his arms as Kankuro set it in his hands. Bringing the weapon to his nose, he found traces of blood, from 2 different sources. Send everyone back, he instructed his sibling. What? Gaara? This doesn't mean. Get them out, the redhead growled, interrupting Kankuro's protest. Rage was beginning to boil in the pit of his stomach and he wanted no one in his way. The puppet master seemed to realize this as well, for he was gone in a puff of smoke. Giving his brother time to complete the task, Gaara brought the fan to his nose for closer inspection. After committing the strange blood scent on the edges to memory, he went in search of any other scent that may have been left behind on the blades. A second unknown scent was found where an unknown male had held the weapon that too was committed to memory before he reached the hilt, and the blood that was all too familiar. Someone had dared to harm his Onezen. Rubbing a thumb over the dried blood, Gaara suddenly had felt the sensation of his body being dragged at an unbelievable speed before being slammed into a wall. Flash. Temari did a backflip to avoid a hail of kunai that were hurled at her. Regaining her feet, she brought her fan up and swung it open with practiced ease, then sent a wall of wind at her attackers. There were 4 shadowed figures, attempting to surround her. She easily deflected their weapons, a smug smile on her face. Their skills were nothing compared to hers. One figure finally took the chance of charging her on his own while his companions sent more kunai and shuriken at her. He managed to get in close behind her and leapt at her, a kunai poised to strike. Temari saw him coming out of the corner of her eye and jumped to the side, at the same time bringing her fan around and catching the man in the chest. There was a dull thud as his body hit the ground, the giant fan having cut through the chest protector he wore and digging into his flesh. As his blood leaked onto the blade, his face finally came into focus. Surprise registered on Temari's face as she moved to pull the fan back, only to have the man wrap his arms around it to stop the movement. At the same time, a shuriken flew through the air and lodged in her hand. She snarled and immediately grabbed the star and sent it back to where it came from. Then, placing her free hand on her fan's hilt, she set herself to remove the man who clung to the end. With a heave, he was lifted from the ground, and just as she moved to swing her weapon, she froze, her eyes going wide. Slowly her grip on the fan loosened and her arms lost their strength. The blades and the man attached to them hit the ground. They were quickly followed by Temari's body as it fell face first onto the sand. A feathered dart protruding from her neck. From behind a rock half buried in sand stepped a 5th attacker. End flash. Gaara's knees buckled and he hit the ground, breathing heavily. It took him several moments to assimilate all he had just seen. Aqua eyes bled crimson as both human and demon rage built to the boiling point. They will pay. Shukaku growled, the demon having long since merged with Gaara. The raccoon dog shared his host's fondness for the female sibling. They will die, Gaara hissed in return as the sand around him came to life, swirling around the lone figure as it built in power and size until it became a tornado reaching 100 feet into the air. Gaara squeezed his eyes shut as pain filled his cold heart. Unnoticed, a single tear escaped and trailed down one pale cheek before it was whisked away by the swirling sand. His lean body trembled with effort as he attempted to keep his rioting emotions under control. In the end, it was like a candle in the face of a hurricane. Someone had Temari, had hurt her, spilt his beloved sister's blood. With a deafening roar, he unleashed his fury on the desert. The tornado turned into a raging storm several miles in diameter as it swept through the countryside. The shinobi not yet inside the protective walls of the village were the only living creatures to survive in its wake. Temari braided her long platinum hair as she stepped out of the bathroom and into the small hotel room Naruto had found for her. She felt much better after showering and washing her hair. A bath had been planned, but after having dinner with Naruto and some of his friends, who had spotted them at the restaurant and invited themselves to join in the meal, she was afraid she would have fallen asleep. Stifling a yawn, she finished her hair and stepped into a clean pair of boxers and another t-shirt she had borrowed from Naruto. Dinner had gone longer than planned, but Temari didn't mind. She wasn't sure when she had ever laughed as hard as she had that night. Naruto and the three young men who had joined them had started exchanging stories, most of them sounding too outrageous to be true. To make up for having to put off shopping for another day, Naruto had stopped by his apartment and gotten her something clean to sleep in. Sighing, the sand nin flopped back on the bed and wondered how she was ever going to pay him back for everything he had done for her. Feeling safe and content, she decided to close her eyes for a moment. Several hours later, Temari jerked awake. Something had disturbed her, but her groggy mind wasn't sure what it was. The lights in her room were still on, but she noticed it was now dark outside. Scanning the room, she tried to figure out what had disturbed her sleep. A dull thud sounded through the wall from the adjoining room, causing her to jump. It's just someone in the next room, she berated herself. Nothing to worry about. Even so, she pulled her knees up and hugged them to her chest. A loud crash followed by an angry male voice cursing on the other side of the barrier caused her body to start quivering. Sliding her right hand under the pillow for her kunai knives, her fingers found nothing but fabric. That's when she remembered that she had given the weapons back to Naruto. Unconsciously, Temari started rocking back and forth as she felt the walls of the room start to close in on her. I'm fine. Nothing's wrong. Everything's all right, she whispered to herself over and over, hoping to convince herself. The sound of glass shattering was the last straw. Bolting off the bed, the kunoichi didn't even pause long enough to slip into her sandals as she flung open the door. Desperate to escape the confines of her room, she fled into the night. Naruto sighed as he folded his arms behind his head and gazed up at the stars overhead. He had been having trouble sleeping. It was too hot in his bed, so he had moved out to the hammock that was strung up on his small balcony. During the summer months, he often slept outside, enjoying the cool night breeze. And it looked to be that time of year again. And your sleeping out here has nothing to do with the fact that your bed feels empty with just you in it. A voice taunted. Kanit Kyubi. The blonde growled. He wasn't sure why the kitsune suddenly seemed to feel the urge to try talking to him again after so many years of silence between them. The demon didn't speak again, but his comment had struck a chord inside the young man. He had to admit, spending the last couple nights with Temari tucked against him had brought to light how lonely his life was. And how good it felt to have a woman in his arms. But that didn't matter, he reminded himself. He was destined to be alone. Having the nine-tailed fox sealed inside of him had also sealed his fate. No one would share their lives with someone considered to be the monster himself. Why was it that most of the villagers seemed unable to tell the difference between the demon and the vessel? Silently shaking his head at himself, Naruto forced his mind to another topic. There was no point in going over it all again, it was a waste of time and effort. Closing his eyes, the blonde focused on the soft night sounds of Konoha. As always, he found them soothing and he was soon completely relaxed and on the verge of sleep. A soft breeze ruffled his golden hair and on its back it carried the sickeningly sweet scent of fear. Naruto was fully alert in a moment. Rolling smoothly from the hammock, he came to his feet and moved to the railing to survey the area. The fact that he was clad only in his boxers didn't matter to the Junin. If there was trouble, he was ready for it. The breeze shifted, making it difficult for him to pinpoint the source of the smell. A moment later it didn't matter as he spotted a lone figure stumbling down the dark empty street below. He recognized the silhouette immediately, Temari. Without hesitation he swung over the balcony rail and landed in a soundless crouch on the ground, 5 stories below. The kunoichi didn't see him, as she was looking back over her shoulder. As Naruto straightened to his full height, she gave a startled shriek as she collided with his chest. He grabbed her arms to keep her from falling as her small body bounced off of his much larger one. Temari immediately started to struggle against his hold and Naruto realized that she was too panicked to recognize him. Tima. Dada. Her name ended with a grunt when her elbow nailed him in the gut as she got herself turned around in his hold and tried to get away from him. Slightly winded, he managed to jerk her back against his chest and wrap his arms around her, pinning her arms to her sides. She screamed and started to kick at him. Temari, calm down. Naruto growled as he gave her a slight shake. Whether it was his voice or the movement that caused her to freeze, he didn't know. Nor did he really care. Temari, it's me, you're fine. He assured her gently, his mouth close to her ear. Her slight form trembled in his arms. Naruto. Her voice was as shaky as her body. Yeah, it's me, babe, you're safe. He confirmed as he slowly released his hold on her. His embrace had barely loosened when she turned in his arms and started to sob against his chest. Naruto's heart contracted, she sounded so frightened and alone. His left arm dropped to her waist while the right moved up so he could stroke her hair. Uzumaki-sama. Naruto looked up to see a masked Anbu, likely one of the night patrol, standing off to his left. What's going on, sir? The Anbu asked. Naruto could tell by his voice that he must be one of the new recruits. It looks like Temari-chan was having a bad night. I'll handle it, you may continue your patrol. The Anbu bowed and vanished back into the shadows. Naruto ignored him, even though he could sense that he had not gone very far. Temari was still crying, so he picked her up bridal style and gently cradled her against his chest while she wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face into his shoulder. Realizing that he had left his apartment without his keys, Naruto simply went straight up the wall, bouncing off of window ledges until he landed back on his balcony. Naruto yawned widely as he entered the Hokage tower. He wondered absently if there was any way he could copy Tsunade and catch a nap in between files. He was bushed. 3 hours of training with Kakashi after only a single hour of sleep was taking its toll. And his work day was just beginning. Maybe he should consider taking a real vacation. Naruto, I need to speak with you. Tsunade informed him before he was even through the door of her office. Good morning to you too. He muttered sarcastically as he took a seat across from her. Tsunade had a very serious look on her face, which told him that whatever she was about to say, he probably wasn't going to like. I have a very interesting report from one of the night patrol, about an incident that took place last night. The Hokage informed him. Naruto edged his head slightly. He was pretty sure what incident she was referring to, but he was curious as to what she had to say about it. So what's this about you chasing a woman through the streets in the middle of the night? Tsunade growled. Naruto's jaw dropped. What? He was on his feet and by the desk in an instant. Give me that report, he demanded. Tsunade merely moved the paper out of his reach and locked eyes with him. There is also mention of a slight altercation with this woman. You mean Temari? Naruto snapped. He saw the Hokage's eyebrows rise slightly at his tone. But before she could say anything, Naruto decided to put the record straight. Even if all the blonde wanted to do at that moment was find a curtain patrolman and wring his neck. And seeing as he could easily find the Anbu, it wouldn't be that difficult of a task. First off, there was no involved. T-shirts and boxers count as clothing. He growled. Temari got frightened by a drunk wrecking his room last night. She panicked and ran. The first was on my balcony and saw her running, so I jumped down to see what was wrong. Needing to do something with his hands other than drive a fist through the wall, he placed then on the desk and leaned down to his boss's eye level. She was so upset that she didn't recognize me when I first grabbed a hold of her to try to calm her down. His blue eyes flashed angrily. That's when the Anbu showed up. I told him that I had everything under control and he could return to his duties. Then I took her to my apartment so I could find out what had happened. Straightening, he folded his arms across his chest as he finished. And for the record, there was no chasing involved. Tsunade regarded him silently for a few minuets as if weighing the truth of his words. Naruto had to fight down the feeling of resentment he felt from her, even considering that the twisted report was true. But he knew it was part of her job. Each case had to be handled with an objective eye. The report also states that a woman crying could also be heard from your flat for some time afterward. Naruto rolled his eyes. Well duh, the girl was hysterical. It took me half the night just to get her coherent enough to tell me what happened. Tsunade opened her mouth to speak, but the young man cut her off. Did this so-called report also happened to state that Temari was not seen leaving my building? The Hokage nodded with a slightly surprised look on her face. And I suppose there is no mention of the fact that after I calmed a very distressed woman down enough to talk, that I doctored up her feet, and when she refused to sleep alone, I wrapped her in a blanket and spent what was left of the night with her in the hammock on my balcony. Tsunade shook her head. Well, it oughto, Naruto growled. That damn Anbu was there watching the whole time. Having said his piece, Naruto flopped back onto his chair and glared at Tsunade. His rather mutinous stance was ruined, however, when he yawned again. Tsunade smiled slightly. You look tired, Naruto-kun. She remarked gently. It's been a long night. Scratch that, it's been a hell of a long week. He replied. Dealing with hysterical women is not exactly a picnic. The older woman chuckled. I can imagine. I'm sorry if it sounded as if I was accusing you, Naruto-kun, but I had to be sure that the file was wrong before I took action. Tamping down on his irritation of always having to deal with that kind of crap, Naruto just shrugged. It happens, as long as it doesn't become a habit. Tsunade smiled rather wickedly. Oh, it won't, she assured him. So how is Temari-chan doing this morning? Hopefully still sleeping. I should probably warn you that she's going to be staying with me until Gaara gets here. Tsunade blinked several times in surprise before speaking. In your apartment? A nod. But there is only one bedroom. Another nod. Eyes twinkling mischievous, the Hokage leaned forward. So, is there more to this situation than you're telling me? She asked slyly. Naruto felt a slight blush start to creep up his neck at her suggestive tone. Tsunade Baba, you are a dirty old woman, he told her with a shake of his head. And before that twisted mind of yours gets too far out of control. No, Temari-san and I are just friends, he informed her. She's just afraid to be alone right now, and since it's summer and I usually sleep out on the balcony, giving up my bedroom is no big deal. The young man's voice and manner conveyed a calm that he really didn't feel. Having another person, especially a woman in his personal space, was going to take some getting used to, but as far as he was concerned, at least he got along well with Temari and she seemed to trust him. And after what she had gone through, there was no way he could bring himself to turn her down when she had begged to stay with him. He could have sworn that he saw his superior pout for a moment, but with her it was hard to tell. I didn't realize she had been affected so badly, Tsunade commented. Naruto shifted slightly in his seat. Well, I didn't go into all the details yesterday. He admitted quietly. I didn't want to upset Temari more than necessary. Tsunade folded her hands on the desktop in her no nonsense pose. What exactly did you leave out? Naruto sighed, running his hands down his face before giving Tsunade the full list of injuries that Temari had suffered, with the exception of the more intimate damage. A promise was a promise. The Hokage's face became more grim with every injury listed. That girl is very lucky to still be alive, she commented when Naruto had finished. And now it looks like we may be dealing with a resurrected Akatsuki. Tsunade shook her head in sadly. Don't people ever learn? She mumbled more to herself than the young man destined to take her place. I'm going to call a meeting of the Anbu commanders this afternoon. We need to see if we can't track down these men and find out more about the new leaders of this group. She informed him. Will you be able to pinpoint where you found your guest on a map, Naruto? Naruto nodded. I can, but it would be a waste of time. He informed her. Why is that? Tsunade asked. Because all that they left behind was their scent. There is no way any of our people will be able to find them now. He stated bluntly. Not even Kiba would find anything. The older woman thought it over for a moment. Well, if we scout out the area, we may get lucky and find a clue that can lead us to them. Don't bother. Naruto. No. They're mine. His eyes flashed eerily as he made his declaration. But you said they couldn't be tracked. Tsunade protested. She was slightly off balance from the weird way Naruto was suddenly talking. I said our people couldn't track them. I never said I couldn't. His smirk was almost evil. Then you can lead the team. No team. Once Temari is safely back home, I will deal with them. With that said, he got to his feet and went about his morning duties. Tsunade had to suppress a cold shiver that ran up her spine. She wasn't sure she had ever seen her dear boy look quite so intimidating. But then she dismissed it. Naruto was very protective of his friends. He tended to take any wrongs done to them personally. And if he said he would deal with the situation, he would. 2 hours later, Naruto was sent to oversee the final exams at the academy, leaving Tsunade alone to scheme. It worried her that Temari seemed to be badly shaken by what some would see as a part of ninja life. Tsunade, however, knew better than that. Life as a kunoichi was far from easily. She herself knew how one event could shake one to the very depths of their soul. The Hokage only hoped that the young sand nin would be strong enough to pull herself back onto her feet. If she could, she would defiantly be the girl for Tsunade's precious Naruto. Rubbing her hands together with glee, she realized that she couldn't have planned this better herself. Naruto and Temari would be living in the same space, hopefully for a while. If she had anything to do with it, it would be a long while. Close proximity brought limitless possibilities, and the very protective streak Naruto had displayed earlier, Tsunade chose to take that as a good sign. A knock on her office door interrupted the Hokage while she was trying to come up with some way of helping her adopted son along with his love life. Enter, she called. The door opened and admitted a tall silver-haired Junin. Kakashi. Good to see you. Tsunade beamed at the masked man. The scarecrow's one visible eye blinked in surprise at his commander's tone. My mission report, Hokage-sama. He said, handing her a scroll, since he couldn't think of any other way to respond to her strange greeting. Tsunade accepted the scroll and set it to the side of her desk. Tell me, Kakashi, what do you think of Temari-chan? One silver eyebrow lifted. Temari of the Sand. The Hokage nodded as she tapped her painted nails on her desk. Temari is a very skilled ninja. Strong, brave and gutsy enough to stand up to her brothers or anyone else for that matter. Why do you ask? Kakashi was puzzled as to what this conversation had to do with him. Yes, I know all that. What do you think of her as a woman? Tsunade asked, making waving motions with her right hand. Kakashi had the very distinct feeling that he was being played into some kind of trap. Folding his arms across his chest, he answered as carefully as he could. Temari-san is a very beautiful young woman as I recall. It has been some time since I have seen her. Is that all? Tsunade asked, rather put out by the very general answer. Perhaps if you told me the point of these questions, I could find answers more to your liking, Hokage. The Junin commented dryly. Do you think she would suit Naruto? Kakashi did his best to hide his surprise at the question. This was definitely turning into one of the most interesting conversations he had ever had with the female Hokage. And after the one they had had earlier in the week that was saying something. I assume you mean how would she suit him as a wife? He asked. Tsunade nodded with a grin. She definitely liked the sound of that. They do get along well as I recall. He stated. His visible eye suddenly widened. Is there a plan to strengthen the alliance with a marriage, Hokage-sama? Tsunade edged her head and tapped her chin with one slender finger as she contemplated his words. Now that's a good idea. I wonder why I didn't think of it. She grinned again, leaving Kakashi very confused. Begging your pardon, Hokage-sama, but if marriage was not planned. May I ask why the questions? Tsunade smiled wider. During Naruto's last mission he came across an injured Temari and brought her back with him. Kakashi nodded his understanding, even as he wondered why his former student had not mentioned this during their morning spar. And due to various circumstances, our little San Kunoichi is going to be living with Naruto until her brothers come for her. Very interesting. Kakashi mused to himself. And you're planning their wedding already? He asked sagely. Tsunade's smile turned into a hard look. Do you have a problem with that? She snapped. My experiences with Naruto tell me to let the boy do things on his own, in his own time. Kakashi commented as he bowed slightly and headed for the door without waiting for a dismissal. In other words, stay out of the boy's business, Tsunade. Kakashi was gone before Tsunade could respond. Temari sat nervously playing with her fingers as she waited for Naruto to return. When she had woken up around noon, she had found a note telling her he would be back early to take her shopping. After finding something to eat and having a shower, she realized that she didn't have anything to wear except the t-shirt and boxers she had slept in. And the boxers had a knot tied in the side to keep them from falling down. She had snooped through Naruto's closet, but without much hope as his t-shirt nearly reached her knees. So it was no surprise that all the clothes she found were at least 5 times too big for her. Naruto was a big man. Although only slightly taller than her 2 brothers, the blonde leaf shinobi had a much larger build, even larger than Kankuro's. Funny how she had never noticed that before now. And strange that she didn't feel threatened by his obvious strength. Of course, none of that was the reason she was fidgeting on the couch now. She was reliving the events of the previous night and berating herself for being such a sniveling weakling. Temari was still having trouble believing that she had actually begged Naruto to let her stay with him. She was a Junin, for crying out loud. She shouldn't be so dependent on anyone. The sound of a key in the door caused her to jump. But she was able to compose herself before Naruto stepped through the door. Hi Temari, did you sleep well? He asked with a cheerful grin. It was amazing how she felt herself relaxing in his presence. Yes, thank you. She had about worked up the nerve to open her mouth and tell him to forget about her asking to stay when he held up a bag. I stopped by the hotel and picked up your things. Your clothes have been washed and pressed. For some strange reason Temari found herself ready to cry. He had gotten her clothes cleaned. She was really getting pathetic. Doing her best to keep her wayward emotions in check, she retrieved the bag from Naruto and thanked him. Why don't you get dressed and we'll go catch a bite to eat before we go shopping? He offered. Are you sure? Temari asked. She had never heard of a man who willingly went shopping with a woman in tow, especially for said women's clothes. No problem, I need to get a bunch of groceries anyway. I cleaned out the fridge before I left so there isn't much food in the house. He informed her with a smile. So that's the reason. Well, at least he's being honest. Temari decided not to let the offer pass, even if she wasn't planning on staying with him. So she quickly retreated into the bathroom to change. Scarcely 5 minutes later, she re-emerged ready to go. She felt herself blush when Naruto took in her appearance, then nodded him approval before ushering her out the door. So what would you like for a late lunch, Temari? Naruto asked as they descended the 5 flights of stairs that lead down to the street. Well, I seem to remember you saying once that you always eat at the ramen stand at lunchtime. Do you still do that? Temari asked. She really didn't care where they ate as long as it was food. I do, Naruto confirmed. But you already had ramen today. Startled, Temari glanced up at him. How do you know that? Did her breath smell? Naruto chuckled. Because that's the only thing left to eat in my cupboards other than pickles and crackers. Oh, I guess you're right. Temari admitted, feeling kind of silly for her reaction. I really don't mind though, she assured him. They reached the street and Naruto steered her towards the market area. I don't care either way, whatever you want, he told her. Food is food and I'm starving. Then ramen it is, Temari stated firmly. With another chuckle, Naruto led the way and they were soon slurping down noodles. So how has your day been? Temari asked when she was finished her bowl while Naruto was on his third. Not bad, I could use a nap though. He winked at her to tell her he wasn't serious about the comment. Temari still felt guilty having kept him up most of the night. She was really going to have to find a way to make up for all the trouble she had caused him. Ready to go. Naruto's voice brought her back from her musings and she realized that he had finished his noodles. He was placing money on the counter to pay for the meal when Uncle Naruto split the air. Here comes trouble. The blonde chuckled as he turned and slid off his stool. Temari also slid from her perch and was just in time to see 2 young children launch themselves at a crouching Naruto. The blonde caught one in each arm, then quickly stood and started to spin in a tight circle. The boy and girl squealed in glee at his antics as their legs swung out from the momentum of the rapid turning. Once Naruto came to a stop with the 2 giggling madly in his arms, Temari was able to determine who they must belong to. With their black hair and eyes, they had to belong to the Uchiha clan. Doobie! Came another childish squeal. The source was a small boy who was toddling towards them as well. Temari guessed he was about 2 years old and it appeared that he was trying his best to keep up with his older siblings. The toddler was followed by a glowering Uchiha, Sasuke, who was also escorting a chuckling, very pregnant black-haired woman with dancing blue eyes. Temari almost didn't recognize the woman. It had been a number of years since she had seen her. Yuta, a girl Sasuke had met in Sound and after escaping Orochimaru had with Naruto's help gone back to get her. Naruto set the 2 older children down and bent to pick up the little one. However, the older boy, who appeared to be about 7 and girl approximately 5, didn't seem ready to let go of the big blonde, so they both jumped onto his back and hung onto his neck and shoulders when he stood again with the toddler in his arms. All 3 children squealed as they were lifted into the air. What are you doing here, Doobie? Sasuke growled at Naruto once he had caught up with his children. Doobie, the toddler mimicked with a toothy grin. Ignoring the child, Naruto rolled his eyes at his old rival. Eating? What else, ba? Birdhead. All the youngsters giggled. Temari didn't catch the Uchiha's reaction. She was distracted watching the way the older kids were now clinging to Naruto's clothes in an effort to stay on his back. But she didn't miss the correction Naruto had made in mid-speech. She was pretty sure what he would have said if the little ones weren't present. You're late, Sasuke retorted. You're usually done lunch by now. Temari was puzzled. She had no idea why it would matter when the blonde ate. I am definitely missing something, she mused as she noticed Yuta trying to suppress a grin. You know me, Sasuke, anytime's a good time to have ramen. Naruto's chuckle was almost drowned out by 3 little voices. Ramen. Temari started as the 2 clinging children suddenly dropped to the ground and ran over to their father. Can we have ramen, Daddy? Please, please. Two voices begged in unison. Peas, peas. The toddler mimicked from Naruto's arms. Temari saw both Naruto's and Yuta's shoulders shake with silent laughter as Sasuke was being assaulted by three pairs of puppy eyes. Still unsure exactly what was going on, Temari stepped up to Naruto's side and gave him a questioning look. The R word was mentioned. He explained with a grin. It just happens to be their favorite food. The Sand Nin still wasn't sure she understood until she heard Sasuke point out that lunch had already been had for the day. But it's ramen, Daddy, please. The older boy begged. We'll share. The girl offered. No, you had some the other day. The Uchiha stated firmly. Ah, Dodd. Again in unison. No, and that's final. The black eyes man then glared over his children's heads at Naruto. Meanwhile, Yuta untangled herself from her harassed husband and approached Temari. Temari of Sand, right? She asked in her soft voice as she extended her hand in greeting. Yes, Uchiha, Yuta, isn't it? Temari replied as she shook the offered hand. It has been some time since we have spoken. Nodding, the dark-haired woman smiled. That is true, I don't believe you have been in Konoha in quite some time. It has been at least a couple years. Temari agreed.